Pinonyondan. Oi! Oi!
So looking at the key points for this kata, first big takeaway is the use of open hands. Similar technique to Shodan, but now with open hands. Most people can make a fist, even if they're not trained. They've seen enough films and punch-ups in the pub to be able to make a fist. And some people who might even work out there's different striking surfaces on a fist. But it takes a lot of practice and a lot of knowledge to start using open hand techniques. And there are multiple striking surfaces on the hand, on the open hand. From Naihanchi, Haishu, the back of the hand, powerful strike. Taisho, Shuto, Seiyuto, using the pisiform bone, Haito. So these are skilled and more advanced uses of the hand. And because now this is the fourth of the series, presumably you will have a couple of years of training in. So you'll have reached the skill level to be able to use these various striking surfaces rather than just making a fist. So I think a big change with this kata, introducing more advanced concepts. The second point, what we'll do is we'll discuss these now, and then we'll do some little practical demonstrations. But this idea of one technique, 1,000 applications. So when we do the little demonstration video, we use the start of the kata and we'll interpret it a couple of three different ways, how you could use the same move in different contexts. And that might sort of help you understand the kata a bit better and for the kata to become much more practical and useful to you. Because rather than it just being striking, you can get into sort of grappling and jiu-jitsu type techniques. The third concept to take away from this is doji ni, two together. There are techniques within this where the defensive technique and the striking technique are simultaneous. One of my favourite martial arts films, Kuro Obi, the two main characters in there, one of them is a Goju-Ryu, 7th Dan Yagi Sensei. And in a video talking about partner work, his philosophy was 1 and 2 is the end of you. It's too slow. If you come up against a skilled striker, a boxer, they talk about punches in bunches. So if you're relying on a block and then a counter punch, you're probably going to hit multiple times. So the idea of being able to meet a technique and strike at the same time, that sort of nullifies any sort of counter punches they might be throwing towards you. So we'll have a little look and demonstrate some of the principles of doji ni, two together. And again, we touched on this in the last video of Sandan, where some of these apparently sort of karate style striking techniques can actually be grappling techniques, tagumi. So we'll demonstrate some of those as well, to just give you a little bit more insight into what, to start with, doesn't look particularly promising as a wrestling technique or a grappling technique, but is actually quite effective. So we'll try and flesh out some of those for you. So moving on to the little practical demonstrations we mentioned in the key points section. We've now gone open hand rather than close fist. So we'll have a quick look at some of the striking surfaces that are available with open hand techniques rather than closed fist. So we'll be using Simon as my crash test dummy. So, Naihanchi kata, Heishu, back of the hand. So powerful strike along the jawline into the neck. I think whether it's just a black country term or whether it's a common term, but you also get threatened with a backhander. Well, Heishu is that very backhander. Another open hand technique, Taisho, using the palm of the hand. Strikes into the nose, strikes into the chin. The classic karate chop, Shuto, with the muscle part of the lower hand, striking into the collarbones. Specific Kyokushin technique to strike into the collarbones and rip down. A similar strike, Seiryu, which is striking with the pisiform bone. And again, hitting into the neck or the jaw. And the other classic, Haito, the opposite side of the hand, where we can strike in onto the jawline to the jaw. So these are the more advanced striking techniques that you can use using open hand. Even if I could borrow Simon again, Nukite, maybe not into the body, but certainly into the eyes or into the throat. So that becomes a viable weapon if you're striking into the eyes, into the throat area. So more advanced, but we're starting to see that in this kata. So from the second key point of one technique, 1,000 applications, we'll look at the start of Yondan and try it in 3 different styles of technique. A striking technique, a jiu-jitsu wrist lock type technique, and finally a grappling tagumi type technique. So you can see how it can be adapted to various situations. So the first technique, classic striking, as we said before, that the kata doesn't necessarily say where the attacker is coming from. It's where you need to be in relation to the attacker. So as the technique comes in, this is the angle I need to be to meet him. So we've got the technique to cover, to block. And now we've got a Taisho strike to the nose. So that would be like a classic interpretation of the use of that technique. So this can be a wrist lock type technique. So as the attack comes in, we meet it, take the elbow. We now have a wrist lock. So it's gone from being a pure striking technique to a wrist lock technique. In the Sandan video, we covered this idea of tagumi, the grappling side of martial arts and karate. In that instance, if we're in this position and I want to break this grapple, we used from Sandan. For Yondan, we can do something very similar. So if we're in a grappling position, we can use this hand and this hand to break. So you can see that these are techniques that can be used in different ways. So it's not necessarily just striking techniques. You can use it for breaking grappling, you can use it for wrist locks. So just a little mind exercise where you can take some of these techniques. So the third key point is this idea of doji-ni, 2 together. The earlier katas were very much block punch. But if you come up against a boxer who's used to throwing jabs and hooks and multiple punches, block punch might not be enough. So Dojini is this idea of blocking and striking, or evading and striking simultaneously. So back to the demonstration we did earlier, as the technique comes in, boom. We're not trying to block and then punch, the two are happening together. So it's not giving him chance to get a second technique off. Another section in the kata is as the punch comes in, we get this. But there's nothing to stop you turning it into block and strike at the same time. So as the punch comes in, boom. So he's not getting chance to perform a second technique. So this is, I think, the first time I can recall in the katas so far where we've seen this idea of Dojini, two together. And again, this is more experience. You're past 1, 2. You should be able to string combinations and techniques together by now. And I think this is like the start of that process. So the final key point was looking at this from a more grappling jiu-jitsu point of view. So some of the techniques can be adapted into wrist locks and submissions. So we'll take a little look at that, and again we're sticking pretty much to the kata, but there's a concept that Kenwa Mabuni came up with, that you take chunks of the kata and apply them as needed. So for example, in the first little section we'll show you, as we demonstrated before, but then we'll use a variation on this part of the kata. So there is a difference in where they are in the kata, but they can be applied as you need them. It doesn't have to be done exactly in the order of the kata. So we'll demonstrate that one now. So as the technique comes in, we meet it, bring it over, but we can now take control of the elbow and bring him up into a Sankyo Aikido type technique, where we can control him and move him around as we want to. So we've gone from here, this section of the kata, to a later section. By just adapting the technique slightly, we've got a practical technique from it. So if we do it once more, over, bring him up, turn him round. So looking at another section of the kata from what's usually described as a Juji-uki, we can also turn that into a wrist lock submission hold. So if we go again, we meet the technique, bring it over to control him, but now we can pull this in and apply a wrist lock. Push forward and strike. So we've just performed that section of the kata, but now in a slightly different view. Rather than it being a kick, we're trying to Juji-uki. We can apply a wrist lock. Push him forward to control him, strike him on the head. So if we do that once more. Come up, push forwards, strike. Out he goes. So hopefully you can view the kata a little bit differently now and try and get a little bit more from it than just basic blocking and punching.
Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed what we've done. Again, if you don't agree with it, you don't have to use it, but there's lots of things there to go away and practice. Quite a fluid kata, as katas should be. So, yeah, we've enjoyed doing it. keep up the support on the YouTube, so try and give us the thumbs up. If you want, put the thumbs down, but you know. But yeah, and we've quite enjoyed some of the comments that you've been putting on there, and you know, on Facebook as well. It's given us an opportunity to answer a few questions that you've had in your mind. So yeah, keep up the communication. That's what this is all about. Okay, so thank you very much indeed. Ash.